In case at any point you would like to know what am I doing with my talk, where I'm going, here is a sequence of points I will try to make. The basic message is that online misinformation is not new and will not get old. It started long before 2016, started with the search engines and was exacerbated with social media. I'll tell you a bit about the research I have done for the elections in the United States in 2006, 2010, 2016. And one of the messages I will try to convey is that these big, upsetting elections in the US in 2016 had the script already written in what we call a Twitter bomb, something we discovered in 2010. So I'll tell you about that. So we have developed a tool called Twitter Trails to help us understand how technology can help make sense of misinformation. But basically, the problem is way too complex, and you can't just solve it through technology. You need the collaboration of many different fields. We have met really a topic that we can't just slap it together and find a solution very easily. So let me start with what is fake news. Usually you hear these terms. You will always see me putting the term fake news in quotes because people use it in a variety of ways. But the way I use it is this kind of set of lies, but formatted in such a way that will tempt you to click and be informed as if you were reading news. So make you feel that it is news by some kind of authority, and you will be informed, but it can hurt you. This little piece of fake news was supposedly about a sexual abuse ring that was headed by Hillary Clinton, and it was operating out of the basement of a pizza parlor in Washington, D.C. Somebody actually believed that. It looks ridiculous, I know, and this person decided to take the law into his hands because apparently the police was in cahoots with Hillary Clinton and wouldn't do anything, would not save the kids. So he grabbed his gun and he went to save the kids. Instead, he found himself be arrested and in prison. There was not even a basement in that pizza parlor that he was expecting that he would save the kids. So this is tragic, of course. Few months after that, that is in the middle of 2017, I was preparing a paper. I thought, well, let me take another look to see what Google thinks about evidence in terms of Pizzagate. And much to my surprise, every link I got from Google was saying that, yeah, indeed, there is a lot of evidence about Pizzagate. Here is more evidence, and here is more exposure of evidence, and more evidence, and more evidence. Each one of the links was willing to give me more information about Pizzagate, So you may want to stop for a second and say, okay, what should Google do if indeed that was such a ridiculous conspiracy theory? So that's your homework. I will go on and we will be talking about that. I've been thinking about the subject for a long, long time. Probably I'm the oldest person who's been thinking about this. In 2003, with one of my students, we wrote this paper with a catchy title. Of course it's true, I saw it on the internet. The reason I used this title was because my father, whenever he wanted to explain to me that something was really true, would say, of course it's true, it's on the newspaper. What I was finding at that time that really made me worry was that our students were confusing their ability to retrieve information through search engines with their lack of ability of critically think about the information they were finding. It used to be the case that to do research, it meant that you have to dig and find information in hidden places. But now, a search engine was making it very easy to find information. The difficult bit was actually to make sense of what you were finding, to see whether that was, had any validity or not. And of course, the success of this search engine called Google did not help the situation because Google, even today, has just a big screen, blank, with a place in which you can type a question. And you have two buttons. One is to do a search, and the other is I'm feeling lucky. That is, just tell me the answer. Tell me what it is. And we'll give you the first result if you ever click this I'm feeling lucky. So pretty much Google tries very hard to convey the trust that we should feel towards it, but it doesn't mean that it finds always the right information. So years ago, more than 13 years ago, 2005, I was doing some research trying to see where information about steroids were coming towards these Canadian pharmacies. You may remember this term. The Canadian pharmacies was, companies that supposedly were operating from Canada and they were selling illegal drugs in the United States. So looking for human growth hormone, one of these things that athletes, if they're found consuming it, they are being banned forever. I would find that, with $39.95, you solve all your problems. You take this drug and you become thinner, taller, sexier, smarter, richer, everything. $39.95, who wouldn't go for that? I was wondering, what the heck, why this is happening? And here's the homework again. What should Google do? Well, apparently it did not do much, because in 2011, Google had to pay $500 million penalty for promoting this kind of information from the so-called Canadian pharmacies. So it costed quite a bit. And the question is, why shouldn't they do something about that? Well, the answer is they were trying, but it's not that easy. So why is Google giving us this information? I think this cartoon kind of gives it very clearly. This old man has been trying all his life to find the meaning of life. We all try to find what the meaning of life, right? And the kid says, look, if it's not on Google, it doesn't exist. This is really the point, that if you do not rank high on Google searches, you may as well not exist. Well, no matter what you think, what you sell, what you believe, if it doesn't come up, you don't exist. So there is a whole industry, turns out, that I discovered along these ways. It's called search engine manipulation. In computer science, we do not have so nice names. We come up with geeky names like web spam. So what is web spam? What's search engine manipulation? It's an attempt to modify the web. That is, modify the links in the web and the contents of web pages so that they will influence what the search engines see in order eventually to benefit the spammers, the manipulators. So you are essentially modifying that network, modifying the contents, but eventually who's going to be influencing the search engine so that the spammers will benefit. And this is a very interesting definition, because another way of defining what is propaganda is an attempt to modify our own network of trust. Each one of us in our brain, in our mind, we have a trust network. The people we know and how we, what kind of trust we have for each one of these people. So a propagandist will try essentially to modify this network of trust that we have in our brain in such a way that our actions will be influenced. We will buy something, we will vote for somebody, etc., in ways that the propagandist will benefit. And the field goes way back. Around 1938, when it was not clear which side the United States will enter the war, there was a whole effort in actually pushing the United States in the side of Germany, or at least stay outside of the war instead of with the side of the Allies. And a bunch of people in New York tried very hard to analyze how propagandists think and eventually figure out how to deal with that. Because if you can understand how propaganda works, you can figure out how to defend against propaganda. Number one rule is the so-called word games. When you are using adjectives, is either positive or negative, to influence people's opinions. So if I start saying, this is a terrific college, immediately I, kind of influence you towards this direction. And if I say, oh, this college is a failing one, I push you another way. You may know that there are some world leaders these days that they use this technique every day. There are many more techniques, but I was studying, since we have a diverse audience, I'm not going to get exactly how it works, but I will just give you a particular set of examples that we discovered at that time. So in 2005, we published this paper with this weird title for a computer science journal, Web Spam, Propaganda, and Trust. It's the first time that the term propaganda appears in a computer science paper. You can imagine the troubles one has to publish such a thing, because computer scientists apparently were not doing propaganda. And you try to give it to social scientists, and they look at it and says, yeah, we understand propaganda, but what is web spam? So, but we did try to figure out how things work. And we would end the discussion as follows. We figure that one way to understand how Google is being influenced and how Google is promoting propaganda or web spam is through the backlinks of websites. So, imagine a web page, and on a web page you have links pointing to different directions, right? Now, if you could look at the page and figure out who's pointing at your page, you can figure out how visible this is going to be to a search engine. So by backlinks, we were studying who's pointing on particular pages. And Google, was measuring these backlinks heavily. So we end this paper by saying, well, okay, let's say you found the spamming network. What do you do after that is the important question. The default approach would be that a search engine might decide to delete the spamming network or downgrade it or whatever. But you can't have necessarily a universal acceptance about what we should do, because one person's spam might be another person's treasure. At the same time, willing or not, a search engine was becoming really the de facto arbiter of truth, of what people believe. So that was 2005. You would expect that Google will do something about that, and indeed, Google did do something. It made it clear that we could not continue this kind of research because it removed the functionality from its interface that would allow us to look for backlinks. So if you get embarrassed, just make sure that people cannot embarrass you anymore, and then hopefully you can fix the problem. At least that was the hope, that Google, it's full of smart engineers, they will do something about it. This is from Search Engine Land, an organization that's following also what happens. And they are complaining that Google decided to essentially cut this functionality without warning anybody. A search engine is a very complicated piece of software and has many different pieces. For us, it seems like there is only a server there which gets our query and then produces the results. But there is a piece that crawls the web continuously, collecting data. And there is a piece which counts the words in these and looks at the links. But the important thing that the search engine is doing is called ranking. You're given a set of keywords, and a search engine will look in its index, will figure out how many pages contain this kind of information, and then will try to give you an answer. But it will come up with millions of possible pages. What's going to do? It will rank them. That's the important thing. If you can manipulate the ranking of a search engine, you have really manipulated the search engine. Search engines have been trying over the years to improve their ranking, and the spammers and the manipulators, have tried to mess it up. When Google came, there was a great time of optimism because they claimed that they have figured out the way of measuring quality. You may go back to Plato and Socrates and you will see that they were fighting in Phaedrus about what exactly is quality. Google figured out, look, if you are pointed to in your page by other quality people, then your quality goes up. It is a recursive definition, In order to be somebody, I should have other somebodies pointing at me, telling good things about me. So the idea is, the important thing is that beautiful mathematics behind that, and in fact, this function converges. It looks like this kind of recursive definition might never converge, but it does converge with a little bit of smart mathematical work. But this technique can be manipulated. And I gave a name to this manipulation. I call them mutual admiration societies. What's a mutual admiration society? You see, Google, all it can do is to just see how many people point to a particular person or a particular page, and then measure also the validity of these people. So let's say we all agree to collaborate so that we all appear great in the face of Google. You have a web page and you are in biochemistry, and you have a web page and you are, selling shoes, and you have a web page in which you are, selling the Canadian drugs, and I don't know what I'm doing. If we all agree to point at each other, to the eyes of Google, we are all important. And in fact, this scheme is looking here, advertisement that I found, resource partner addition. It just says, look, we're looking for people that right now they have PageRank 6. PageRank was going from 1 to 10. So if we all point to each other with PageRank 6, eventually, very soon, we will have PageRank 7. PageRank 7 had, Harvard and Wellesley. New York Times had PageRank 8. That was Google had PageRank 10. So this is a big scheme, if you can get this to work. So that was one thing that these spammers were doing. The other was the so-called manipulating the anchor text. So let me tell you what is the anchor text. When you're having a web page and you decide that some word or some sentence points to another page, you usually take this piece of sentence or phrase and you create the link out of it. You create the anchor out of it, right? So anchor text is the piece of the text that points to another page. Google's idea was to look at the surrounding text to figure out what this final page is about. So a Wellesley-centric example here. Here there is a link to Wellesley College webpage, and it mentions that it was founded in 1875. So that is associated with Wellesley College, with the final page. And here it is among the best liberal arts colleges. And here is a link about the best women's college. So just by looking at these three links, Google can tell that Wellesley is a college, is a women's college. It was founded in 1875, and it's one of the best liberal arts colleges. So it can get a lot of surrounding information without even having to look at the web page at the other end and see what exactly this page is talking about. Very smart idea. Unfortunately, it can be manipulated. And the way you manipulate it is by creating links with rare words that would eventually point to where you want. It started as a joke. People thought they were upset with George W. Bush, he was a dumb failure. So they started creating pages in blogs, whatever, with the term miserable failure pointing to the page of George W. Bush. It turns out that all it takes like under 30 links of that short, and you end up having, whenever you're looking for miserable failure, you're finding George W. Bush. Yeah. And then, of course, the other side gets really upset, and they start creating Google bombs for Jimmy Carter, and Michael Moore, and Hillary Clinton. And this goes on for a while, to the degree that in 2009, when Barack Obama was inaugurated, he became the next miserable failure. We call that a Google bomb. So a Google bomb is when you're associating some keywords and you're pointing to whatever information you want. And that can give us, a laughter in the beginning, but also let's stop for a second and say, okay, we're looking for information on the web. What if we start believing in lies? The first thing is that we will feel bad about it. It has this kind of effect on ourselves. It's not good to believe in lies. We may end up buying this useless health supplement. Okay, I wasted $39.95 and I did not get any reach or toll or anything like that. You might end up buying a lemon for a car. One of the early companies to actually manipulate the web was BMW, and were pushing for their own cars. You might end up buying junk stocks. It's still going on, this kind of... all of these things will cost you a little bit, but not that much. It can get dangerous when you start looking for treatment, let's say for cancer, and you hear all of this evidence, apparently, that to treat cancer, all you need to do is chew apricot seeds, because this is part of the, misinformation that's out there. This is getting more serious. Here you can hurt yourself, but you can hurt the whole country if you end up voting for the wrong candidate, of course. So, in fact, the first known Google bomb starts in the 2006 elections, when a group of supporters of one of the US parties decided that they will start creating a bunch of Google bombs against 50 candidates of the other party, and tried to promote and started recording all of these things now you can find in the archival of the web. And of course, the other party did not stay put and immediately created their own bombs. They had their own 45 candidates to bomb. At the end of the day, one of the parties started saying, okay, that was quite successful. We ended up affecting about 700,000 people in these elections. And in fact, out of the 50 candidates, they were able to elect 30 of them. So it's never easy to figure out whether a bomb had an effect. Because if you ask anybody whether the way they voted was influenced by this particular piece of information, almost nobody will tell you, yes, we did. Nobody would like to believe that they were influenced. So it's difficult to say exactly what happened. However, these people apparently thought that they were successful, and eventually Google thought that they were successful too. So in 2007, they came up with a new, better way of finding ranking. And they said, okay, PageRank, what we're telling you, that's nothing. We have over 200 different signals now that we are using in order to figure out what is quality in web pages. Yes, maybe so, but in 2010 and even today, you can actually create positive impact on Google ranks by exploiting even negative information about yourself or your company. Here is an example in which somebody was selling fake designer glasses, and people were very upset about that, so they started writing letters and blog posts that this bastard is actually selling junk. And guess what? That had an effect, that this person's junk website actually was coming higher and higher up. Because in this kind of evaluation of quality, it does not matter if what people say about you is positive or negative. All it matters is that you have exposure. So I have there in the top the words in Greek of a Greek proverb that says both fame and infamy are both kinds of advertisement. You see the word fame, infamy, and advertisement in Greek has the same root, fame. So, and we have several other examples. We started looking at what happened in the 2008 elections. What happened was that Google had made sure that, yes, you could manipulate designer glasses or, shoes, but when it comes to elections, you have a pro forma, pretty much, a template in which you are not going to be able to essentially push negative information or whatever you want above the fold, above the top 5 positions. The spammers tried again in the elections in 2010, and they didn't seem to succeed. They also got quite a bit of pushback from their own audience, saying that what you're doing is really not right. So it didn't seem like in 2010 it worked, though people were worried at that time. And there were some researchers that came up with the following idea. They said, okay, what if Google itself tries to influence the elections for its own purpose? So self-manipulation is what they're worried about. In my mind, that makes no sense to happen, because the moment Google is caught self-manipulating its own results in unfair ways, it's going to run out of business. People will really be upset about that. But nevertheless, I kept looking for elections, and I looked at the 2016 elections. You cannot easily manipulate Google's results for elections in 2016. Pretty much, there is a frame, and you cannot penetrate it easily. You can manipulate Yahoo and Bing, by the way, even today, but not Google. However, there was another thing that was happening since 2010. The social web started coming of age. The social web is social media, Facebook, Twitter, this kind of things. So in 2010, in Massachusetts, we had some special elections. Ted Kennedy had died. Ted Kennedy was the most liberal of the Democratic Party senators, Massachusetts is one of the most liberal states in the US. You can't imagine that the person who will challenge the position for replacing Ted Kennedy from the Republican Party will win, right? And so here are the two candidates that they were coming up. Google, at that time, followed actually a lead by Bing, had this smart idea. I will start putting in the third location of search results the so-called real-time results. In other words, I will still have my news in the beginning, then the official results from the electoral candidate, but in the third position, I will start putting, real-time information, what people write on Facebook and Twitter and so on and so forth. Why were we collecting this kind of data? In 2010, the common wisdom was that, if you collect data from the social media, you can predict elections. I mean, that's how the polls do it, right? They go out and they make phone calls and they ask people on the street, who you're going to vote for. We have social media. We can just observe what happens in social media and we can find out. So we started collecting data. Can you really predict elections? I don't want you to be in any kind of, suspense. So I think this poster we did for a conference says, no, you cannot predict elections using social media. And the logic goes like that. I have called it the unpredictability theorem, in quote, like the uncomputability theorem. If it was possible for you to predict elections using social media, this is a high stakes event. People would try to mess up your data so that their candidate will come up, so you can predict it. And of course, those who like your predictions will try to mess it up to make sure that your predictions are holding. And there are also those pranksters out there that will try to make fun of everything, so they will try to mess up your data. So you cannot predict. But what you can do is mess up the elections in Massachusetts by creating a Twitter bomb that will create a Google bomb at the end. You remember I told you that you can essentially use the third location of Google search results in order to promote your own stuff. So through Google, essentially, you can promote your candidate. That was in websites of 2010. What we found was that there was a particular group that was trying to promote the idea that one candidate supposedly was saying that if you're a doctor, and if you're a Catholic doctor, you should not become an emergency room doctor. That somehow, was against Catholic doctors. So when we looked at our data, we discovered that these people were creating the first bots. You probably have heard the term bots. A bot is a piece of program, a few lines of code, which will try to behave as if it is a real human and kind of tweet and retweet information about whatever subject. By the way, if you're not very familiar with the term tweet, it means a message to the world, and retweet means verbatim kind of repeating a message that you saw. So this was the first attempt to actually create bots, and we found that at least 9 accounts had almost identical behavior and managed to reach initially 573 users in 138 minutes. However, several of the people who were getting this kind of misinformation, they liked it so much that they retweeted themselves. So even though these bots lived only for 138 minutes, the misinformation they propagated lasted for 2 days, up until the day of the elections. They launched it 2 days before the elections. And so we're creating a lot of misinformation because of the timing. How did they do it? Here is the technique. You start by creating 2 pieces of material that are going to be useful for spreading misinformation. You're creating your fake accounts, and you're creating the pages with misinformation. All right? At this point, nobody knows of your accounts, nobody knows of your misinformation. So you need to make it known. What do? You join a group, you join a community who feels very angry about something. In this case in Massachusetts, where Republicans who were afraid that if another Democrat is elected, essentially Obamacare would be unobstructed through Senate because they had filibuster-free majority. So you are joining that community, you are giving them the misinformation, and then it doesn't matter if you are deleted or you go into hiding. Why is this important? Because this is exactly the technique that people used, the Russians, whoever else you want, was behind the 2016 Facebook fake news organization. There were people who created these kind of fake accounts and they created the fake news pages. And then they joined a group that was feeling very emotionally strong about whatever it was that they cared. So they went both for the Democrats and the Republicans, both for the Trump supporters and the Bernie supporters and the Hillary supporters. They joined this group and they stayed quiet for a while. And then at the appropriate time, usually before the elections, they started spreading their misinformation. The people who were in the group thought that, look, some from our community give us this information. Of course we believe that this is true. We already know that the other side is so corrupt that they will do that. So once your misinformation group is able to launch such an attack, then you can go into hiding. You can even delete your account and people will not be able to find you. Unless you get lucky like us, who monitoring what happens in our elections, we were able to uncover a bunch of those. This is the upsetting part, and this is a technique that has not disappeared, will very likely appear in the next elections, by the way, because it is very powerful. It rests not on logic, not on critical thinking, but on emotions. And when it comes to elections, we all have very strong emotions. So I will end up very soon with a few thoughts about that. I just want to make sure I'm not going too far over time. So far, so good? All right. So we wrote about this paper in a paper last year. Was it preventable? Now, being a computer scientist, people come to us and they say, you know what we want from you? You write code. Write a piece of code that will solve the problem. So, write a problem, create a website like I have questions and tell me where is the button that says answers and click it. We can't exactly do that, but what we do is that we create a tool to help you analyze, investigate some kind of rumor and figure out what it is about. So we call it Twitter Trails. And Twitter Trails kind of looks at tweets. It works on Twitter, not on Facebook. Why? Twitter allows researchers to look at their data. Facebook does not. Recently, supposedly, this will change. We'll see. But on Twitter, actually, we can run investigation. Facebook kept everything tight. I mean, they were thinking like they know exactly what they were doing. Turns out they messed up big time because they were fooled. They tried to create artificial intelligence, supposedly, machine learning, to do the critical thinking on their own. And of course, the spammers made a joke out of Facebook's algorithms within a day. We're not there in artificial intelligence yet. So we're looking at different tweets here. Here's the first one, says, some Dominican newspaper uses pictures of Alex Baldwin instead of President Trump. Are you serious? Alex Baldwin is somebody who plays in a comedy show, Saturday Night Live, and pretends to be Trump. And so some Dominican newspaper actually used the picture of Alex Baldwin instead of that. The Attorney General used alias email to discuss climate change and with Exxon. That looks like a breach of trust of the executive. President Trump says, terrible, just found that Obama had my wires tapped. And other things. One of them is the Pizzagate. So what Twitter Trails is doing is it investigates stories based on some starting tweet and keywords. So what we do is that we start from a tweet that maybe comes to our attention. In this case, somebody was saying that in Las Vegas there was a second shooter shooting towards the crowd that had gathered for this concert. So you get suddenly a tweet like that and you wonder, is that true? Let me try to figure out. So you start launching an investigation and Twitter Trails within a few minutes will come back and will give you a few answers. not whether the rumor is true or false, but will tell you a few things that can help you think about the story. Like, who started this rumor? Who was the original poster of that? When did this rumor become more known? How did I end up learning about that? How exactly the propagation goes? Was it like a burst and then has died? Is it really low, or it is still going on? Who are the main propagators of the story? How can you recognize them? What can you tell about them? Is there any negation in what people tweet? So is there any doubt out there that people actually do that or not? And who are the main actors according to the community? So I will give you a little bit a briefing about the investigation of Pizzagate, and you could go to twittertrails.com and explore yourself at your spare time. You will need a computer that has a bit of memory because it is a large set of data. So we see these tweets saying, keep telling yourself that it's fake news. Nobody wants to believe that people are killing and torturing children. Not in America, Pizzagate. All right, so we start from this. And by the way, if you go to bit.ly/TT for Twitter Trails, capital TT Pizzagate, you will see the link to the investigation that we have. So Twitter Trails will come quickly and will tell you how it started, the investigation, in our case, in the 2nd of December of 2016, and who was the initial investigation. And then we'll tell you, in this kind of propagation graph, how things propagated. So this is the number of retweets some tweet received. The higher up, the more retweets you have. And this is the timeline. Will tell you day by day, what was happening. The size of the bubble will tell you the potential of the tweet. If I have more followers, I have a greater potential, right? More people will see what I do. So the diameter of this bubble will be the logarithm of the number of followers I have. So it's not really linear, but to get from this bubble to that bubble, you will need like 4 times more followers. So if you look at the person who had like the most profound effect, you end up seeing a Turkish journalist. Wait a minute, we're talking about Pizzagate in America, like what the Turkish journalist has to do. Well, this Turkish journalist is really upset because people complain that in Turkey there are kids from Syria, orphans, who are being abused. So his reaction there is that, oh yeah, they're talking about us, look what they do in America. And how did he hear about that? Well, just before he got informed, there was a troll, that is somebody informing in Turkish, posting towards every Turkish journalist he could find about this abuse that happens in America. About hundreds of those, keep posting saying, this is what happens. And eventually, who was that person? Well, I'll tell you in a second, but look how the timeline of the Pizzagate worked. It started on the 6th of November. The New York Times and Washington Post have reported that it started on the 7th. We actually found that it had started a day earlier. And for a long time, it was very quiet. Until at some point, got this kind of high expectation. Who started this investigation? This troll, Jolly Archer, which now it is, defunct, has been deleted. And so we could see what kind of bullshit. Somebody who could visit this person's website could figure out that, this cannot be real. It seems like a prankster of some sort. I don't know if it was Russian prankster or whatever, but that's what we found. Now, how people were communicating about the information. Usually, whenever you look at a story which is highly polarized, you see a polarized graph. So this is the network of co-retweeting. So it's a network of how the main actors are viewed by the audience. It's not the retweeting, it's the co-retweeting, how the audience views. And usually, this is not about Pizzagate. This is about Trump firing James Comey. You see one group that it is in favor of one side and another group that's in favor of the other side, and they are separate. The distance will tell you how much they hate each other, how much they might communicate. And you could figure out just by looking at the keywords they have into their profile, who are they? So the greenish group has as keyword in their profiles the resistance, so are more on the democratic side. The reddish group has on their profile the word MAGA, Make America Great Again, so it's on the Republican side. So you can look at this and immediately get a sense about what's happening. What about Pizzagate? Pizzagate was nothing like that. It was a huge echo chamber of people, extremely dense, about 5,000 people who kept retweeting at each other with more and more atrocious details of supposedly what happens in Pizzagate. This is the big message. You know, whenever you are in a closed environment in which everybody agrees with you, it's easy to be fooled. Because nobody will raise their hand and says, I would like to differ. You're all kind of agreeing in that, and in fact, that's how extremism grows. If you are in a group and you would like to raise yourself above the crowd in an echo chamber, you will have to say something more outrageous than the previous guys. Otherwise, if you just say what everybody else is saying, nobody will pay attention to you. So that's what we were finding. And we also have pictures, etc., etc. So what can we do? Well, this is the last piece of my talk, and I will try to finish in another 7 minutes or so. What do you do about propaganda, fake news, and misinformation? Technology, you know, things like Twitter trails can help. Fact checkers, people will check to see if the information is valid or not, would help. Up to a point, because usually it's not information that we're missing to believe something. It's much more. So what else is needed? Here, I would like to go a step back and think about epistemology. Why do we believe what we believe? Well, we believe things for 3 different reasons. Either because we live through that. Our senses tell us so. You know, every language has an expression like, I saw it with my own eyes, meaning that I trust my eyes, I trust my senses. It happened to me. We also trust things because somebody that we trust tells us so. You know, our college professors, a librarian, a political party that we trust. So this is how my father would explain who they trust. My father trusted newspapers, among other things. So we have these intrinsic reasons and extrinsic reasons, but we also create derivations between what we saw and what we heard and who we trust, right? So this is where the critical thinking plays a role. And it is important to trust your own critical thinking abilities. The bummer is that each one of these 3 different groups can be actually compromised. The intrinsic reasons, our own senses, they're not infallible. We may believe things that we remember incorrectly. Our brain is not really a hard drive that has data and all we have to do is just access this piece of data. Every time we remember something, we recreate memories. And in fact, it is enough if we just heard something, no matter if it was true or false. After a while, we'd not really remember whether it was true or false. We just remember the thing. Some lawyers actually are very good at manipulating a witness by just introducing memories. We also believe things that we misunderstood. We thought we heard so, but it turns out we heard something else. We just don't know. We also believe things that we thought under the influence of substances, yeah, of course, under fear, anger, passion, desire. You know that when you're angry, you should not be making an important decision, or where you're feeling very passionate about that, because, or if you have not slept well. You can find lots of cases in which we can be fooled by our senses. Actually, you're going to be more successful if you think about other people who have been fooled by their senses, because we are much better able to actually detect this kind of problematic behavior in others than in us. The vast majority of us don't, believe lies intentionally. So our own senses cannot be trusted. That's one thing. How about the world around us, the ones we trust? Well, things we learn as children are not true. We know sometimes, like, Santa Claus does not exist and Tooth Fairy does not exist. Astrology is not real, but you will find adults who still believe in these things. Trusted authorities might have actually fooled us, like political and religious and pseudoscientific beliefs. Every week you will hear, at least I hear, of another drug that solves the problem of cancer or Alzheimer's, and all you have to do is chew this or eat that. Advertisers have been training us to believe in lies for a long, long time. This is really one of the greatest compromises, and we do not pay attention because, okay, you just bought a piece of junk. You feel sorry about that, and you feel ashamed. You're not going to say it. But the most important thing is that we believe things that already confirm what we believe. This is a major flaw of our personality. It's called confirmation bias. Let's say, and there have been amazing studies about that. Let's say that we have a group of people. Half of them believe X, and half of them believe not X. And then you give them a set of facts, the very same one. And then you ask them again, okay, now what do you believe? Those people who believed X, they believe X, but even more strongly than before. And those who believe not X, they believe not X even more strongly than before. Why? They're looking at the set of facts, and they're picking the ones that are already agreeing with what they believed, and they ignore the others. So we have problems here, we have problems there. How about critical thinking? Well, we're in education. We know how hard this is. The vast majority of people don't understand what exactly is critical thinking. They think that critical thinking means like, okay, somebody wants you to evaluate a statement, look for evidence to see that the statement is true. Well, it takes more than that. Number one, you need to write the statement down in a way that you will not actually go away from really what you want to evaluate. So put it on a fixed medium, that's important. And then look for evidence in favor, but also look for evidence against your hypothesis. Because if you only look for evidence in one side, you might be fooling yourself. There might be stronger evidence against it. Mathematical logic is good to help us with critical thinking, but it is weak. Why? The world is not true or false. There are very few facts in life. I mean, physical sciences deal with the few facts that are true in life. The vast majority of other things in life are opinions, are ways of viewing at things. So mathematical logic has trained us to think that the world is either true or false. Probabilistic thinking is better. But you know what? Humans are not good at probabilistic thinking. We do not even have the language to say that, 75% of the time this is happening. We hate numbers like that. Versus, 56% of the times this is happening. And what is stronger and why and how do you evaluate it? So we try to avoid thinking in probabilistic terms, and our languages do not deal with that. In our language, we use binary logic. You will not find languages that they are very good at probabilistic thinking. And that's why it's much harder, as if logic was not hard enough. Probability is even harder. Okay, whose fault is it? All of them. We have come to this point out of an evolutionary process, and our brain has evolved to play different roles over time. So, are we stupid? Well, we are not really stupid, but we have a brain that evolved over time from the lizard brain, then we have the mammal brain, then we have the ape brain, then we have the big human brain, which is very powerful. It deals with logic, but it is very big and it needs a lot of energy to operate. That's why we're not stupid, but we are thinking lazy. We try to avoid thinking anytime we can. A quarter of our energy, of our daily energy, goes to our brain, and half of it is this frontal cortex. That takes a lot of effort, so we try to avoid using it. So we have an amazing brain, but it's not perfect. Our senses, the environment can fool us. We also would like to feel that we are in control, so we hate randomness. We are looking for explanation in anything that happens. So randomness is not something we like. And we try to explain randomness, and we end up with conspiracy theories. Oh, if this happens, it's because somebody did it. And most of the time it's not like that. So energy is something we try to avoid. How do we deal with the problem of energy? We create heuristics and stereotypes and ways of thinking. Racism, in many ways, is an effect of stereotyping. You don't want to examine in every case whether you should trust this person or not. You would like to get into a whole context. Greeks, yeah, I know who Greeks are, I can tell you. And the Turks, oh my goodness. And the Germans, we all agree on that, right? So we are really compromising our critical thinking because it is hard not to do otherwise. Okay, I'm coming to my conclusions. Technology, there are a bunch of things we can do. We can use technology to identify a smart crowd and help us evaluate with information to see if we're living in an echo chamber or not. We can use financial incentives so that people will not be making money by producing fake information. And recently we see some examples of that. We need to create good interfaces that will not make it easy for false information to be propagated in a easy way. We need to understand the scientific method. And we need to understand ourselves. In ancient Greek, Socrates was gnosis avton, knowing yourself, knowing your own biases. I couldn't resist by putting this catchy British-like keep calm and gnosis avton to express this statement. So it is very complicated. That's why we have trouble, and we're not going to solve it very easily. Technology can help. Epistemology will help, but it is dangerous to get into epistemology. Understanding all the mistakes, the lies you believe can be painful. I mean, whole religions are based on the idea that you believe some lies. Not your own religion, the other religions. Have you figured out, what ridiculous thing the other religions say? Yeah. We need to understand our psychology, our cognitive biases, to understand how our brain operates, to understand a little bit what we want to do with all of this. Because at the end of the day, it's not facts, it is ethics that we want to instill. Somehow we have to make our decisions. Policies, yes, we need to put a lot of those in place. And Europe's latest policy in actually making sure that whenever you are, people collect your information, they let you know about that and you give them explicit permission, that will help. We have limited attention. I mean, these days, with these devices, we are bombarded with lots and lots of information. Very quickly, you lose track of what's happening. In one case, it is something important that Trump said. In the other case is, this cute little cat that I just saw in the internet. In the other case is, here is what my neighbor just said about me. And in the next instance is, an exam I have to start studying about. And you keep going like that. We all have very limited attention. We cannot really handle that. Somehow we need to protect our attention. Finally, who's gonna be hurt most by all of these misinformation onslaught that we are? Those that we live in democratic communities. Because if you're living in an authoritarian community, you already are restricted at what you will hear and what you believe. We have still the means of essentially defending ourselves towards misinformation, but we have to take the decision in our hands. We have to actually get involved and go and vote. Voting should be something that you have to do. Why? Because it's going to affect you, and you better take responsibility before it affects you. I will end up with this kind of sad story. We all know how democracy started in ancient Greeks. It was amazing. People defended against the Persians, and they came back and they said, we want a stake in our country, we'll do it. How did it end? Well, it ended with this guy, a good-looking populist coming from a rich family. Alcibiades was his name, who in the middle of a peace treaty that the Athenians had with the Spartans, he had this amazing idea. We're going to attack Sicily. For those of you who remember the map, Sicily is far away from Athens. But he had information. He had heard that everybody hates Syracusans. Oh, they are terrible. They are very, very bad. And the Sicilians can't wait to line up with Athenians to fight them. He has information about all of these things. And at the end, he tries to stay the Athenians. Remember our fathers, they were great. What about us? He wanted, and that's how he ends his speeches, he wanted to make Athens great again. Well, Athenians go, and they find out that Sicilians were not very excited in joining them in the war, and Syracusans were actually, they knew how to fight, and that ended because essentially the whole army is annihilated. Thank you very much. I would like to acknowledge the group of students and collaborators, Eni Mustafarai, Samantha Finn, Leah Graham, Daniel Gaio Avello, Lara Zhang, Mega Okifi, Lindsay Tang, and Kili Wong. You will not be surprised to see that almost all of them are women. I'm coming from a women's college after all. So thank you very much, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.